Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. We are continuing our exploration with the FinovateSpring 2026 Best of Show winners. And joining me today, I have Oren Buskila, the CEO and co-founder of Cobalt. Oren, thank you so much for taking the time to connect with me today.
Great to be here, Greg, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, well, first off, congratulations on taking home the trophy. And for our listeners who haven't been on the last couple of episodes, all of the videos from FinovateSpring are now available at finovate.com/videos. So you can see Oren's demo, you can see all of the amazing demos that we had in San Diego earlier this month. But Oren, for people who haven't seen your demo yet, can you start by just taking a little bit of time to introduce yourself and Cobalt to our audience?
Sure. So I'm Oren Buskila. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cobalt. And what we've built at Cobalt is what we call enterprise architecture intelligence for financial institutions. And the core idea is this: banks run on enormously complex systems. They have their own code. They got dozens of third-party vendor systems there on top. And most banks generally don't know what those systems, how they fit together and how they depend on one another. So Cobalt maps that automatically by reading both code and all types of logs and other data sources in real time. And the reason that matters is that without that map, every change is partly a guess. And in banking, that's a very expensive guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly the stakes are very high. Let's start by talking a little bit about some of the challenges that banks face when it comes to understanding their own system dependencies and what those problems can lead to. So can you give us just some high-level examples of the challenges that you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, so there are several major challenges for banks stemming from the lacking of understanding of their own system architecture. So one of them is the development slowness. So any change has to be compared against whatever the existing system is, and not knowing this system makes all changes very slow and makes development very inefficient. So this comes down to banks spending 70% of their huge IT budgets just on maintenance rather than new development. And this is becoming unacceptable today's markets and expectations from what can be done with modern technology. And the second problem is that whenever new features, new releases are deployed into production, there's always some failures happening now and then. Some of them are major. And by major, we mean anything that above several minutes, where there's disruption to customer experience, can cost up to millions of dollars in direct and indirect costs to the bank. And this all stems from the problem of not knowing what change could have caused this failure. So these are things that banks must deal with. And up until now, there wasn't a good solution for this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's going to be helpful to illustrate this is some specific examples. Do you have anything that you can point to where, you've known somebody or you have a story that you can share about, how these types of dependencies have tripped somebody up when they're trying to do something new?
Yeah, sure. So there are countless examples of this in real life. So I'll just tell you something that I heard yesterday from a bank that we met with. So most bank systems rely to a large extent on vendor-provided software, on third-party software that's built into the systems. And those systems are very complex. They were developed over dozens of years, lots of layers, lots of technologies. So eventually, nobody really knows how each vendor system is actually connected to the bank system and what depends on it. So this customer told us about a change made by a vendor to its application. There was a new version of it that needed to be updated in the bank systems. And the bank employee, the bank engineer, made a change and passed the change approval board. And this change found its way into production. And soon after, there was a failure in production that really alerted the entire bank's management. And in the investigation, after resolving the issue, they found that this change from the vendor needed to be updated in the bank systems, not in one place, but in two places. And the mismatch between those two versions caused this failure. So this could be avoided if the bank had this dependency map, this architecture map that showed exactly what depended on this vendor product. And this made our platform immediately obvious in its importance to this customer.
Yeah, and coming back to a point that you made earlier, when you have this kind of hiccup and it can bring a website down or it can crash something for an hour or two, this is potentially extremely costly, both in terms of, there's a very real physical cost. There's also a cost when it comes to customer trust. And it's really difficult to quantify exactly what that's worth, but we know that kind of chipping away at consumer trust can have really negative consequences as well. So again, there's a lot at stake here, and it's easy to see how, somebody could kind of fall into this pitfall where you don't necessarily see all the changes you need to see. You update something, you miss something because it's buried somewhere, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you've kind of inadvertently spent potentially millions of dollars. So let's switch and talk about Cobalt. Now, as I said at the outset, the demo video is up there for everybody to see, and I would highly recommend anybody listening to go and take a look at that video. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about how Cobalt works and how it helps financial institutions to avoid some of these potential missteps?
Sure. So what Cobalt does is to map both the bank's IT systems, so the components, both application and infrastructure, but also the business processes that the bank runs. And most importantly, it actually aligns one on top of the other. So the bank can see exactly which business process use which systems and what depends on what. And this is super important because this allows the bank's architecture team and engineering team to be able to anticipate the impact of any change, thus avoiding any failure or making the necessary changes. And the way that we're able to create this topology map and the business process map is by scanning the bank systems and using data that's actually already there. I'm talking here about event logs, about API logs, about all sorts of logs that exist in every bank. Being a very regulated kind of company, everything has to be logged and documented. On top of that, we also read code, we read database tables, we read everything that can tell us about what's connected to what. And once we have that, we can then create the traces of the business process, like a wire transfer or a loan origination. And once we have that, the bank has the full visibility into its systems and can make any change well planned and safe.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting that I want to dive into a little bit more deeply was this concept of real-time live view of a bank's systems. Now, you don't have to get too technical here, but I'm wondering how you're able to achieve that, because it seems like that's something that's a pretty significant challenge.
It is indeed a challenge to create that live view, particularly versus the existing state of things where architecture maps are done manually and are already stale the moment they are ready. So the whole idea was to have an architecture map that's alive and that's always up to date. And the way we do it is by scanning what we call instances of the whole system every once in a while. And this can be as frequent as the bank needs. So this can be done on an hourly basis or on a daily basis, or whenever there's a major change that's happening. So the team would want to scan both before and after. So we can compare those instances or those snapshots to one another and thus detect any changes made. And this can be also used to investigate any issue that occurred, because you know what the system looked like yesterday versus today. And this is something that just was not possible until this view is available in real time. So that's a real game changer for reliability and stability of the bank services.
Yeah, very cool. And again, as I said, check out the video to learn more. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the demo itself. One of the things that we talked about, you and I talked about before you actually got up there on stage, was how to get these messages across to the audience. And obviously you were successful in that. And the audience responded really positively to you and ended up voting for you. But I'm curious about the conversations that you had at your booth after the demo. Did you feel like most of the attendees who came by really understood what you're doing and the power of what you're offering?
So yeah, we got many attendees coming over to our booth after the demo. And what was maybe not surprising anymore is that the demo really had a big impact on at least the technical leaders in the audience. So what we showed on stage was the bank on a page architecture. So a demo of how we map an entire bank's systems. And this just looked like science fiction to those people because they were never shown that view of their own bank. So obviously this created a lot of enthusiasm and curiosity. And this also sparks just so many ideas from people showing it. And we saw it in the conference right after the demo of ideas of what could be done with this capability. So those ideas span from how we could accelerate the release time through how we could replace this core banking system or database vendor that we wanted to replace for a very long time, all the way to how we can do technical due diligence on a target acquisition bank before actually making the deal. So there's just so much that can be done. And this is what we were happy to hear from the attendees coming over after the demo.
It's always satisfying when the work that you put in pays off in that way and that you feel like people are able to really understand what you've been trying to communicate to them. Were there any unexpected conversations or unexpected types of attendees that you had at FinovateSpring that you weren't necessarily looking for coming into the event?
So yeah, we were targeting mostly to speak with technical leaders like CIOs and CTOs in medium and large banks, which are typical to us because this is where the complexity is. This is what we came to solve. And what we got in the conferences is not just those, but also a couple of other groups that we didn't quite expect. So one was VCs, venture capital people, which there were just much more than we anticipated. So both in the conference and also in follow-ups and email and congratulating us for the win, for the award. So this was really helpful, them coming to us that rather than us going to look for them, which was very good and also a very good signal that what we presented really resonated. And the second group that was a bit surprising is leaders from smaller banks and credit unions. That was surprising because they typically don't have the technological complexity that we see in larger banks. But what spoke to them was the potential of being able to introduce AI, agentic AI specifically, to systems by being able to first map the existing business processes in the bank. So this was very good to see and actually created another opportunity to us with a market that we didn't know that was also very interesting to us.
No, that's great. And that's exactly what we hope that Finovate will be, a place where you can come together and find these conversations, even with people you weren't necessarily expecting to meet. So last question is a fairly straightforward one, but what's next for Cobalt from here? Where do you see yourselves going on the back of this Best of Show win?
So on the back of this Best of Show win, there's obviously all the just business, day-to-day business that needs to be done and need to grow, and there's more leads to follow, more deals to pursue, and that makes sense. But looking forward just a bit down the line, we see now the beginning of a big change in banking, similar to other industries. Banks are also moving towards AI-driven development. So more and more code is going to be generated by AI agents rather than by people. Code is going to be maintained, code is going to be modified and generated by agents. And this means that there's just so much more velocity of deployment that needs to be somehow contained, needs to be somehow controlled. And this is just not possible with today's methods and tools. And again, what's missing is the ability to put those changes in the context of the entire system and understand whether there's anything that's going to be affected. And if so, how do we fix it or how do we prevent any issue? And what's missing is what Cobalt is going to be. We are going to be the architectural layer for any AI-based development in banks. This is what we see as happening. We see it through the eyes of our customers, And this is where we are going. And again, the conference really highlighted that very strongly. AI is everywhere, and Cobalt is going to be a necessary layer in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly you've got quite a bit of proof right there from FinovateSpring. Congratulations again on taking home the prize. We will continue to talk to our remaining FinovateSpring Best of Show winners over the course of the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Oren, thank you so much for taking the time to connect with me and give us all a little bit more behind the scenes on Cobalt.
It was great talking to you, Greg, and thank you for having me.
Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@Finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.